MiCA 2.0. Is great oversight needed?
I am in charge of the university program, but I also had a previous role as the chair of a regulator, a technology regulator, and that's the perspective I'll bring to this panel.
Okay, thank you, Miro.
My name is Miroslav Djuric, solicitor and attorney at law at Taylor Wessing, based in Frankfurt, in Fintech space for almost 5 years now, advising crypto clients majorly, operating in Europe and in the UK.
Okay, super. Justine?
Great. My name is Justine Herrera. I'm also a lawyer by profession. I work for Michael Cipriano, which is a group of companies. We're based in Malta, Cyprus, London, Dubai, Kiev, London. I basically work in fintech, investments, crypto for the last 5 years. So assisting companies get regulated, licensed, structuring from Malta, but also from other jurisdictions.
Super. Thank you. For everyone else, I am Jean-Michel. I run a Web3 startup, and we offer Web3 Rails as a service. That's basically what we do. So anyway, usually when I have these discussions, it's rare that there's sort of three people with somewhat of a legal background, and I usually start with how do you feel about regulation, just to get the bias out of the way. But lawyer, ex-regulator means that's kind of obvious, right? So I guess we can sort of move on into something a little bit more interesting, which is the previous panel mentioned that VFA or that MiCA is largely based on VFA. Do we agree or do we not agree?
Okay, I'll answer that since I'm Malta-based, I guess. I would definitely agree to the extent that the crypto asset service providers are licensed. So basically, MiCA is regulating crypto asset service providers and issuers. When it comes to crypto asset service providers, the regime is practically identical. You have a minimum share capital, governance, policies, procedures, approved key roles. And basically it's a license, just like you're licensing financial services or investment services. So the licensing regime is pretty similar in terms of the process and the requirements. And I would say we're already aligned with MiCA, definitely. So as Bob previously mentioned, if you have a license from Malta or choose Malta as a jurisdiction for a license, it's definitely a good option. So I think there's maybe a couple of other jurisdictions which are quite aligned. Most other countries just have AML registration, which is far from being MiCA aligned. When it comes to token issuers, I would say we're not really aligned, and we've gone a bit beyond, I would say. So I wouldn't say right now under VFA it is a great choice for launching your token. However, post MiCA, obviously there'll be an alignment on that, and the process will be practically the same. I don't know if you want me to give maybe an overview of MiCA or keep it for the next question.
No, I mean, that was like more of a lawyery answer than I was expecting to but to be fair, what I'm trying to understand is how closely aligned are they? So yes, we have we know there's some kind of overlap, right? Because the Malta were effectively trailblazers, right, in this area. And I think there was a mention of like 85 or 90% overlap. Is that something that you specifically agree with? Is that the gap?
Crypto asset service providers, yes, we're 100% aligned. For issuers, we're not aligned. Cool. I think it's an important distinction to make.
Absolutely. What do you think?
I probably cannot comment much on the Maltese law, but I could maybe answer a question from a different angle. So if we look at other European jurisdictions waiting for MiCA right now, we see that we have different groups of countries, right? We have countries like Malta or, for instance, Germany that have designated crypto regulatory frameworks that are somehow aligned to a certain extent or almost completely aligned with MiCA. On the other hand, we also have regimes like in France, registration regimes, and we have countries that have no designated frameworks at all that go beyond registration for virtual asset service providers for the anti-money laundering purposes. So I believe that definitely countries like Malta will have an easier task to align their current legislation with MiCA, and businesses that operate in jurisdictions where already there is a certain level of regulatory certainty, it's going to be easier for them to continue their business operation under MiCA.
What about, Josh, when I ask you this, what do you think about the Estonian license compared to MiCA? Is it the same kind of
So
Discrepancy.
I wasn't too involved in the financial asset regulation. I was more involved in the technology regulation, and I would trust Justine's assessment of the situation. But what I think Malta also did was set the gold standard for technology regulation. We really set out a robust framework when it comes to smart contract auditing and auditing of technology in general. Now, MiCA does refer to DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, but it's not as well defined as what we did in Malta. So it'll be interesting to see the direction that they take. But there's similarities then to the AI Act. The AI Act proposes setting up of a new technology regulator, which is what we already did for blockchain and then AI. So I think Malta is ahead in a few regards.
Yeah, AI, I think, is definitely an area in which the EU's losing the race. So hopefully we can figure some stuff out there. So let's stick on the ITA side, on the innovative and technology arrangement side, and how does MiCA address this exactly? I think we'll stick this to Justine, because she's maybe a little bit more familiar.
So MiCA doesn't really address the systems audit side. Obviously, we have two extra acts, ITAS and MDIA Act, which is where you audit basically the underlying technology. When we get aligned with MiCA, I believe those will be fully repealed, because we are going sort of beyond when it comes to that. So, I mean, we'll have a systems audit, but it won't be the systems audit which we currently have under our regime stemming from these two acts.
Fair. Miro, how do you see MiCA affecting the legislation of, let's say, DeFi projects or any innovative kind of tech, blockchain or otherwise?
I think my belief is that MiCA will definitely have for European businesses a positive impact, because, you know, if we talk about the startups, we also have an excellent panel coming on the significance of MiCA for startups. So one of the main things that you need to do when dealing with investors and when committing to those post-closing undertakings, you need to commit to compliance with applicable regulations. And for businesses that are operating in more than one European jurisdiction, this was really hard so far. You know, I have clients, for instance, operating from Ireland or operating from Germany that want to scale their business, but then they need to check regulatory framework in every jurisdiction. This was a very cumbersome process. Regulatory risk is very high. But on the other hand, if we look at what MiCA is going to bring, we're going to have a single set of rules. So you're going to be able to explore the full potential of the EU single market based on one set of rules. There's not going to be too much place for gold plating, because we have a regulation, a directive. So really the rules, even a specific rules administrative practice of supervisory authorities, is expectable to be very, very similar across the entire EU. And I think that having said that the EU will really be leading the way in terms of the regulatory certainty if we compare it to some other key jurisdictions. When someone mentioned UK beforehand, I also agree that UK really missed the chance to really get on this train and regulate the crypto industry when the time was. There are some steps being taken now, but... I mean, to be fair, even if
They're kind of out of the EU now anyway, so it would be kind of...
Indeed, if we look from EU perspective, you're right, but still, I mean, UK as a jurisdiction of choice will definitely remain important for certain businesses. However, I think that if we compare EU with the UK and bigger jurisdictions, so like the States, where we don't have any regulatory framework at all, really it could be concluded that the EU will be leading the way, and therefore we can expect more crypto businesses coming to the European Union and deciding to operate from here.
And if I can just add on to that, in terms of DeFi, so MiCA specifically states that it's not addressing DeFi and NFTs. Yeah. So basically, from 18 months from entry into force of MiCA version 1, there'll be MiCA version 2, where they'll specifically address DeFi. So at the moment, it's not regulated. It will remain unregulated till we have MiCA 2.0. What we have in terms of DeFi regulation is the travel rule. So basically, if you are sending a transaction or assets from a non-custodial wallet, let's say MetaMask, to a crypto exchange, now, in reality, according to law, there should be KYC coming from the non-custodial wallets. Obviously, in reality, no one is implementing this because technically and operationally it's quite impossible. There's nothing embedded within that framework and that infrastructure. So obviously, providers are reaching out and trying to get clarity on how they are expected to comply with the travel rule, and that is one headache which all exchanges and custodians have, because there's nothing embedded within the technology to actually comply.
Absolutely, and this I think sort of like leads me to my next issue, which is laws drafted by lawyers, and tech changes extremely quickly, and there are I think a handful of lawyers out there that are really worth their salt in tech, and if they really know what they're doing, I find it rare for them to operate at European level, because the good ones are out in private practice making ridiculous amounts of money, as they should, right? So we know that GDPR, for example, was one of these instances in which lawyers tried to solve a problem that I don't think they fully understood. Although I think, in retrospect, I think it worked out quite well because there was some sort of element of proportionality, right? Like GDPR is a massive deal if you're a big conglomerate with a large amount of data. But if you're a small guy, you can get by with a simple privacy policy and TNCs, EULA, yada, yada, yada. How does MiCA compare to this sort of scenario in terms of proportionality?
So rather than proportionality, I quite like the comment that you said on not having the tech knowledge. When you're regulating technology, you really need technologists, you need lawyers to be completely disagreeing across the table to come up with a solution. And even though we're saying we're going to go towards MiCA 2, let's see it happen, because what we did with MiCA is bloody easy. All we did was regulate centralized entities. We know how to do that. Now let's come up with the solutions for DAOs. How are you going to regulate a DAO? Now, there was some thought in Malta going into that. It became more of an academic exercise. But let's see how far we get and how quick. I don't believe it's going to be that quick, because that's where the challenges come in.
I think what they'll do to try and regulate DeFi is really make an assessment at the protocol layer. So see where there's a concentration of wealth or ownership or voting powers when they start sort of uncovering the protocol, because really and truly our protocol is really decentralized these days. So I think they'll sort of make that assessment and exercise to peel off the layers of the DeFi protocols to see if they can be caught under those regulations. I'm not saying I agree or I don't agree, but I believe that is the approach that they will take to try and regulate that space.
To the point of proportionality, I think that was a really good point to mention. I completely agree with you. We talk about MiCA 2.0 and MiCA in general. So really what needs to be done, technology experts need to sit together with lawyers and draft these new rules. And also we shall not forget one important stakeholder group, which is the finance experts. So we are talking in a great amount about the financial services here. And I think if we talk about DeFi, if we talk about crypto lending, let's use the basics of traditional finance, regulation of traditional finance, when looking whether something needs to be regulated at all. So we need to look, okay, what are the risks for investors? Do we have retail investors? Do we have professional investors? How certain activities work. Let's say, for instance, crypto lending. One of the main issues with the lending, as we saw with the FTX and SALVUS, is exactly taking client funds and lending them on the other side. That's not going to be possible under MiCA 1.0 anymore. So let's say, do we need any regulation of crypto lending at all? We maybe do. Is someone doing this on a commercial scale? It should be regulated to a certain extent. Is someone doing this on a P2P level, let's say to retail clients? We already have exemptions for this, for instance, under crowdfunding regulation. So you really are not conducting a regulated activity if you lend 100 euros to a project owner for a crowdfunding offer. So I really think that we should not forget these, despite the fact that crypto industry sometimes has a bad feeling with traditional finance is being mentioned. I think that we should not forget this, because regulation of traditional finance has over 30 years of expertise now, and we should just follow similar principles that are aligned with the specifics and features of the technology that should definitely stay in focus.
Yeah, so I think the summary and takeaway here, right, is that there is no I think there's no one right answer for what the next steps are, or there's not one right opinion, but we need multiple stakeholders to come together. I think it's quite refreshing, for example, to hear a lawyer talk about protocols, right? It's like even just the possibility of having a conversation with someone at a legal background that understands the 7-layer OSI model, for example. That in itself is a rarity. In the same way, it's a rarity to find somebody with a traditional finance background that really gets deep tech. And same thing with law and tech, right? So all of these points need to end up converging, and probably the solution, I would say, lies somewhere in the regulation of a DAO, because what is a DAO at the end of the day? Like you said, Joshua, no? What is a DAO if not the cumulative input of information at the end of the day, right? And some sort of a consensus. Anyway, final remarks and thoughts. Justine.
I mean, the final text is out, but the European Parliament haven't voted yet. I mean, final thoughts would be, if you're actually operating in Europe, look for a jurisdiction to get licensed or get advice on what the law is going to say, because in about 5 months' time, there's going to be entry into force, and you have a few months basically to actually transpose this law into national law. And then operators have 18 months transitionary period to actually obtain a license or notification or registration. So if you're operating in Europe, you only have a few months to actually act or think now if you want to get regulated. And
quick question, is it a self-regulation process, or do I need a third party to stamp my...
No, it would be. We have to go to the authority and apply for a license, or if you're launching a token, you need to notify the regulator with your white paper. So obviously, depending on the activity, there are related regimes.
Thank you. Great answer. Miro?
I really think that really interesting times are ahead of us. So we're going to see what's going to happen. I think that, as I mentioned before, European businesses are really going to have a higher level of certainty when operating here. And also when it comes to MiCA 2.0, just to briefly address that, I think that EU lawmakers also shall have in mind both this, what we mentioned, that multiple stakeholders need to marry together and work on these new laws, but also European lawmakers shall not overregulate the sector and lose this competitive advantage, because we see other jurisdictions such as free zones in the UAE, Singapore, Hong Kong, developing their own frameworks at a rapid pace. They're attracting global businesses, establishing their global headquarters there. Of course, they cannot target retail clients in Europe officially. However, Binance is not operating in the majority of European countries. It's still the largest exchange in the world. So if you want to use a service provider, you're just going to go online and sign up.
Thank you, Miro.
Like I said, MiCA was nothing more than the regulation of centralized entities. We knew how to do that. I used to say for a long time, MiCA's 3 years too late, but clearly not, because there's still things like FTX going on, so I'm going to stop being so harsh on them. But I'm looking forward to see MiCA 2.0 and how we're going to regulate the actual innovation DAOs.
Awesome. I'd normally reserve some time for questions, but I think we're already running a little bit late. So if you want to approach these guys, do so individually. Thank you all for your time, and have a lovely day.